In this video we'll show you how to get started drawing with AutoCAD. We're going to draw the elevation of this bracket that you see here. But first, some productivity tips for AutoCAD. So the first productivity tip is to use both hands. I would recommend that you use your left hand to toggle the function keys on and off. And when you learn the text shortcuts, you can also enter these using your left hand. Later on, you'll learn how to use blocks for symbols, anything that needs to be used multiple times. It's a good idea to make it into a block. And in the next video, we will look at creating a template file which will speed up our work. So some fundamental AutoCAD or CAD concepts. And the first thing is to realize that in AutoCAD, we draw everything full size 1:1. Now that is irrespective of how big it is or how small it is. So please remember that you don't scale when you draw things. The AutoCAD database remembers the size of all your objects, so by drawing them full size, everything will have the correct dimensions when we add those later. Now, while you don't need to set the limits of your drawing, I would recommend that you set the limits so that you can use the grid and the snap easier for the size of whatever you're drawing. So if I'm drawing the plan of a house, then I would set the limits of the drawing slightly bigger to accommodate the house, and you can always change the limits as you go. Another important concept is that we plot to scale using the layout tabs after we've created our drawing. We simply select a layout which is associated with a particular printer or paper size, and then within what's called a viewport, you can set the appropriate scale to display your drawing. And we have reduction scales and enlargement scales, as you see there. So in AutoCAD, angles are measured counterclockwise. Counterclockwise is positive, starting from east or 3 o'clock. And so north would be 90 degrees, west 180 degrees, and south 270, and so on. If you enter an angle of -90, for instance, that would be a clockwise measurement and would be the same as entering a positive angle of 270. We need to remember that when we rotate objects and you specify a positive direction, that rotation will be anti-clockwise or counterclockwise as indicated here. That's the default in AutoCAD, and we won't change this. I recommend that you learn the function keys that you see here on this slide. These function keys toggle settings on and off, and I recommend that you use your left hand to toggle these on and off because it's quicker. Now you can practice these in your own time, and we'll be demonstrating these when we use AutoCAD. So these are all toggles, like F7 will turn your grid on and off, F8 ortho mode, F9 will turn your snap on and off, and so on. Polar tracking is a very useful one when we're drawing, and that's F10 will turn that on and off, and F11 will turn on tracking. And tracking allows us to use existing geometry to locate points on our drawing. F12 toggles what's called dynamic input, and this will display distances and angles at the cursor, and you can switch between those using the tab key. If you get stuck in a command, escape will always cancel out of a command, and for entering our information into AutoCAD, you can use the space bar, the enter key, or the right mouse button, and they all function in a similar way. So we'll go on now and look at drawing the outline of the bracket that you see here in AutoCAD. Now there are lots of ways to start an AutoCAD drawing having launched the program. So here on the AutoCAD interface, you could click on New, and this will bring up the option to select a template. Now we're going to be using AutoCAD out of the box, as it were, for this exercise, and we're going to use the metric template, which is AutoCAD ISO. Another way to start the drawing would be to click on the file drop down menu and select New. A third way would be if you click on the drop down here arrow and you could select your template here. Or the way I like to start a drawing is if I right click here on the start tab and go new, this will take you to the default templates folder. Now these templates folder, it's a big long path and you'll have something similar. So these are the default templates that come with AutoCAD, and in the next video we'll look at starting to create our own templates. But for now we're going to select AutoCAD ISO and click open. And just before I click on open, you'll notice here that a template is a DWT file extension, and it's a special file, and the colors of the icons here are red as opposed to blue for a drawing file. So click open and we now have drawing 3. Yours may be different depending on what drawing you've opened previously, but either way what you have here now on this tab here is a copy of the AutoCAD ISO template, and we're ready to start. Now you'll notice that I have a white screen here. If you want to change the screen from black to white or to a different color, if you right click on the screen there and select options, click on the display tab, select colors, and in here under 2D model space with the context, uniform background, this is where you change the color. So if you want to use a white background like I have, then you can change it there. The other thing that if you want to experiment with are the grid lines. So we have major grid lines and minor grid lines. So the major grid lines here, I have gone in here and select color, and I've just used the slider here to lighten the grid lines. So somewhere there, it doesn't really matter. Place the slider there, and that's my major grid lines. And then my minor grid lines, I want them a little bit lighter. So again, select color and drag the slider somewhere there. So this will lighten your grid with the white background. So apply and close that and apply and click OK. This here is our origin, and the drawing of the bracket is quite small and it would fit here. So it's very easy to get lost as I start zooming out here. And down here at the bottom I have turned on the coordinates here. So if you don't have the coordinates turned on, if you go over here to the customization command, and in here you have an option to turn on your coordinates, and you'll find it up here at the very top. Tick that. Okay, if I tick it off, and now they're back on again. I've also turned on my quick properties tool here. So turning on or ticking them on here will add them here to the status bar at the bottom. Okay, just click off of that again to close that. So quick properties, I'll toggle that on there. So when they're blue, they're turned on. What I recommend when you're starting off is, rather than trying to deal with all this large space here, see, for instance, if I draw a line from here to somewhere here, you can see that line, and if I zoom out and I'm panning the wheel of the mouse and I drag it again, that line is, let's just draw that line for now. So the length of the line is actually 32 meters. So this line is a really long line, and you can see how easy it would be to get lost there in this big area. So what I recommend is we're going to change the display of our grid, and if you click on the drop down arrow there on the snap tool, you get into snap settings. So this is the drafting settings dialog box in AutoCAD, and for the moment we'll just concentrate on snap and grid. Now you can see here F9 will turn your snap on and off, or you can tick on that box there to do it. We can also do it from the status bar. So our current settings for our snap and grid are 10 millimeters. We might change the snap spacing to 5. So as a rule of thumb, we normally set the snap spacing to half our grid spacing. So for drawing the bracket that we're going to be drawing, a grid spacing of 10 and a snap spacing of 5 is fine. So when I change the X value, clicking on the Y value will default that Y value to be the same. Now what I'm going to go down here and do now is change the grid behavior, and I'm going to turn this option, display grid beyond limits. I'm going to turn that off. Now you have adaptive grid here. I'll leave that on, but it's not really too important, but the grid adapts as I zoom in and zoom out. Now when I click OK, it might look as if you've no grid, but if I start rolling the mouse wheel, you can see that we've now got a much smaller grid. And we've really changed the limits of our drawing. So what we've done here is change the size of the grid area. Now if you double click on your mouse wheel, this will do a zoom all and get your grid there to fill the screen. Now this grid is actually an A3 size grid. So instead of having this infinite grid, we now have a limited area here that we're going to use to draw our bracket. Now if you want to change the what are called the limits of the drawing, you'll find this here in the Format pull down menu. So if I go in here to Format and Drawing Limits, and this is where you have to be careful, and it's important to always in AutoCAD to read what the command line is saying. So it says limits, specify the lower left corner, and that's 0, 0, and you don't ever want to change that. So just hit enter on your keyboard. And now AutoCAD will tell you what the upper right corner limits are. And as you can see here, it's 420, 297. So that is an A3 size page as you would know it from manual drawing. So if I wanted to change that, I could type in the values there and you separate them with a comma, but I'm happy to leave that as it is, but that's where you would change the limits and we'll only be changing the upper right corner. So just hit enter because I'm happy with that. So we're going to draw the bracket somewhere on this. So to help with viewing the drawing of the bracket, so if you don't have it to hand, you could bring in an image file of the bracket. So I'm just going to bring in an image of the bracket and just drop it here. It's just an idea, I don't have to do this. I have the drawing beside me here. But if you wanted to bring in the image of the bracket, you can go to the Insert tab here on the ribbon and over here, Attach. And as it says there, this will allow you to insert external files such as drawings and raster images. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to browse to an image I have here of the drawing. I'm going to click OK on that and I'm just going to place that there on the drawing anywhere at all and click enter. If you wanted to change the size of this, you can click and you can drag it and so on. But that's just an image file, and if you click on it, it says it's a raster image. So we've just dropped that in there. It's externally referenced on the drawing here, but this is just temporary. We can delete that later on. To begin, I'll probably start at the bottom left corner and draw around the profile. We're going to leave the slope line here until later on. I may or may not put in this slope chamfer here. There's lots of ways to do the same thing, but as always the start point is to start from a grid point, and that means to turn on your snap here. So if you remember earlier, we set our snap to 5, and the snap is like an invisible grid, so it's set to half our grid spacing. We can see our grid, but to activate the snap you need to turn it on. So if I now click on the line tool here, and L for line would also work, and move around here, and you can pick any coordinate point you wish, and as I zoom in there you can see that the cursor is jumping onto grid points and also halfway between, because we've got a 10mm grid. So this is point 100, 100, but it doesn't matter what point you start on, just make sure you start on a grid point. So snap always on, and that makes it easier. I can turn on our line weights here, but we don't actually have any line weights set at the moment. I'm actually drawing on layer 0, and that's the only layer that's in our drawing at the moment, and that's AutoCAD's default layer. So as I drag the line across to the left there, if I've got the display, and this is it here, dynamic input, if you've that turned on, then you will see the length and the slope of the line. And again, I can zoom out by rolling the mouse wheel towards you or zoom in. So F12 will turn this on and off, or for the moment just click on it there. So now as I drag this line, you can see the slope of the line and you can see the length of the line. So the length of the line we need to draw here. Now I could have just typed it in, but for now let's just click and there. So the line is 180 millimeters long. Pressing the mouse wheel, you can pan the drawing. So we're going up 50. Now just to be clear, the default or recommended option when we're drawing lines is to use polar tracking. So I've got polar tracking turned on there. So line is 50 millimeters in length. Go across to the left, and if you look at the drawing, you will see that's 70, that's 180. So if I draw across here 110, that will pick up that point for me. We're going up 70 over 70 to the left, and if you want to get back down to where you started, we've just drawn a chain of lines, and you can see dropping that back down there, and we'll snap on to where we started, and shows you that it's 120 millimeters. If you type in C for close, that will complete the chain of lines for you. So that's just another way to do the same thing. You'll notice that I didn't put in the corner here, so let's do that now. You'll notice here I have a green box, and that's my object snap, and we can turn that off using the F3 toggle, which is here. So if I click on that, now I go up here, I don't actually have the green box anymore. So if you click on the down arrow there beside the object snap, we have certain object snap settings turned on. So at the moment, in point, center and intersection, and we don't recommend having too many of these turned on at the one time. So when you turn it on by pressing F3, the ones that are ticked on will become active. So it would snap to the end point of a line, center of a circle, or the intersection of two lines, or indeed the intersection of a line and an arc, and so on. Sometimes we need these function keys on and off, and if you press F3 on your keyboard, that will toggle it on and off, as you see there. So at the moment I want it off because I want to start from that point. Now this point here is 100 for the X value and 220, and we want to start 10 millimeters to the right of the corner there. So if I click on this point here, and remember it's snapping, and we've this drawing here, we've set it up so that all our lines are multiples of 5 millimeters or 10 millimeters. So I can just simply draw that directly there. So now we have this chamfered edge here, and we need to remove these lines. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up to the properties of the layer here, and we only have the one layer, and I'm going to increase the line weight just to make it easier for you to see, and I'm going to set the line weight to 0.5. Now as I'm here, I'm going to create a new layer for our center lines. So I'll just create a layer, I'll just call it center, and I'll give the center line layer a color of red. Click OK on that, so that's the color specified. The center layer has duplicated the properties of layer 0. I'm going to change the line weight for my center lines to 0.25, which they would normally be, and the line type, I need to change that. Now when you click here on the line type, because we're just using AutoCAD out of the box as it were, there are no line types loaded. So I'm going to load, other than of course the solid line type, I'm going to load the center line. So we've all the lines that are in AutoCAD in here, and we could load them all, and we'll do that when we create our template. But for now, I'm just going to load the center line type. Click OK, and that gets loaded into your drawing. Select it and click OK to assign the line type center to layer center. Layer 0 is still our current layer, but now if you turn on your line weights, you can see that it makes it easier for you to see the drawing. So again, this is a show hide line weight toggle, and it makes it easier, as I say, for you to see the drawing. If you right click on this line weight icon here, you can go in and you can change the line weight settings, and you know, if you drag it all the way over to the right, you know, it makes the lines look very thick, so I don't recommend that. So let's go back, line weight settings, and drag the slider down here towards the left and click OK. Now if you wanted to check that that was actually 20 millimeters from the corner there down to there. Over here on the home tab you have the utilities panel, and in here we've got measure, and we have a quick option, or so if I go select distance here and F3, turn on your object snap, and that's down here, clicking on that, and now you have the object snap in point and object snap in point, and you can see that that distance there is indeed 20 millimeters. So at any time, if you need to verify or check your dimensions in the drawing, you can do so. It's important that your drawing is accurate. I'm going to click on this image here and just drag it, and if you want to move it, if you click move here and you click anywhere, you can move the image a bit closer or anywhere on your drawing, and that's just, as I say, to save you having to print out the drawing. Okay, to chamfer off this corner here, we'll use trim, and selecting the trim tool, and you can see what it does there, creating an opening for a door in the image there. Clicking on the trim tool, and all you have to do is go directly over the point. Now this is new in 2021. Previously you would have to select your cutting edge, but whatever I click on is going to get trimmed. Now we want to trim here and trim here, so you just click on the geometry that you want to remove, and that forms that corner there for us. We've got a line going from this corner to this corner here. Now these points are on grid points, and so you can just simply F3, I'll turn this off again, my object snap. You can obviously go from that grid point to that grid point directly, but what about if they weren't on a grid point? In that case, you'd use your object snap to snap to the geometry. So in this case, it doesn't matter, but normally we would have our F3, our object snap, turned on. So there's your object snap in point and object snap in point, and then press the space bar or hit enter on your keyboard, and that gives you the line there. Next we'll put in the two circles. So to draw a circle, you've got 6 different ways of drawing circles here, and we'll use center and diameter. Now we could work out, this corner here is 100, 100, so the center point that we're looking for is up 20, and its absolute coordinates would be 120 and 190, so that would be the center of the circle. Now obviously there are other ways of doing this, but for now we'll just click on that absolute coordinate there. So again, my snap is on and we're looking at integers. If your snap was off, then you're into decimal places and so on, so make sure your snap is on. So 190 for the X value, 120 for the Y value, in my case, will give me the center for the circle. So as I drag it there, you can see it's displaying the diameter, and the diameter in this case is 20. So enter 20 and hit enter. If I hit enter again, AutoCAD presumes I want to draw another circle. Now you can see here I'm tracking off of the corner here, so that would actually tells me that I'm over 35, and if I drag up in this direction, I need to go up a distance of 60, which would be there. But just go back and just use absolute coordinates here. My center for this circle has an X value of 135 and a Y value of 160. So let's click, drag. Now you'll notice that because I just continued on from the previous circle, it defaults to radius. So you can put in the radius, which would be 12 in this case, or if you want to change to the diameter, if you click on the drop down arrow on your keyboard, or you can go down here to the command line and select diameter. So now the value that you input will be the diameter. Now the graphic again shows you that, So it's always best to use the values that are on a drawing rather than calculating what the radius might be in this case. Now this corner here is rounded with a radius of 10 millimeters. Now the tool we're going to use to do this is the Fillet Tool. So the fillet rounds edges of objects, as it says there. So select the Fillet Tool. And the first thing you need to do is set the radius. So the radius in this case is 10. Enter that, hit enter, and then click the two lines any order you wish, and obviously click on the bits that you want to keep. Usually you can get a preview there before you enter it, so you can see what it's going to do. So there's our fillet. So if you click there on the fillet arc, you can see its radius is indeed 10, and AutoCAD also captures the coordinates of its center. Now if you want to put in the center lines, we could go up here and change the layer to center, because all the lines we've drawn so far are on layer 0, and layer 0 is a bit special in terms of AutoCAD and blocks and so on, and it's the default layer, and normally we don't draw on layer 0. So now with layer center as the active layer, if I click on annotate here, we do have an option here to put in center mark on circles. So click on this, turn your snap off. So let's turn our snap off and click the circle, and I'll do the same with this circle, and AutoCAD will put a center mark on our circles there like that. So there you have our drawing. We're not going to dimension this today. We can come back and look at this again. This image here is actually an externally referenced image, and I'll just show you that. So if I type in XR, which stands for external reference, you can see here that this bracket image in our drawing has been loaded in there, and what I'm going to do now, I'm finished with it, is I'm going to right click on the bracket image here in our drawing, and I'm going to detach it. It will totally remove it from my drawing. So now it's gone. So we've detached that from our drawing. We haven't saved it yet. It's still called drawing 3, and the asterisk here on the drawing tab tells you that you haven't saved it. So to save it, just click on the save icon here, browse to the folder where you want to save it, and enter a name. So let's call this drawing bracket elevation. Now you'll notice that the type of file is AutoCAD 2018. That's the default file type for AutoCAD 2021. In other words, Autodesk haven't changed the file type since the 2018 release. So even though we're using the latest version of AutoCAD, the file type hasn't changed. Now you can see other saving options here, including our template, which we'll look at the next day. But a drawing file is a DWG file, so by default it will be an AutoCAD 2018 drawing file, and we don't need to change that unless, say, you're creating a template, which we'll look at again. So click save, and that now gets written to your folder, and if you hover over the tab here, you can see the full path here as well. So our drawing, of course, is in model space. So if you wanted to move the drawing, you could select the move command here on the modify panel, draw a window around the geometry, select the corner that you want to use to grab the geometry. Now you want to make sure it's on an integer, so turn your snap, your F9 on, and turn your F3 off, and then you can place this on any grid point like so. This is now on different grid point, and if you wanted to check this, you have a useful tool here in the drop down called ID a point. So click ID point and F3, turn my object snap in point on again. and you can see that the coordinates of that point are 150, 150. Okay, you want to move it back again, draw a window around it, grab it, and so just move it back down, and this coordinate here is 100, 100. If you wanted to check the ID of that point, it's 100, 100. So it doesn't really matter where you place it, it's anywhere there on our grid in model space, but do start on a grid point, and to do that, snap must be on. So again, you see the asterisk here, that tells me that we done some changes. So click on save again, and that updates it. So now there's the current version of our drawing. One thing that I forgot on looking at the AutoCAD interface in my previous video was the different ways you can display the ribbon, and you can minimize the ribbon to tabs, panel tiles, panel buttons, and back again. So if you wanted to do a check on your drawing, an accuracy test, and if you've done this exercise, check the length of your slope line here, and that line should be 130.384 millimeters. Okay, so that's your accuracy test for this exercise, 130.384. So if I want to check the length of the line here using the distance tool, object snap in point, so make sure you've got your F3 turned on, and click here, and you can see here the distance or the length of the line is 130.3840. So that's exactly the length that you should get when you measure the line on your drawing. And if you don't get that exact value, then go back and see where you made a mistake, because you must be accurate when you draw in AutoCAD. AutoCAD's accurate to something like 16 decimal places. Okay, so thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.